You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
And welcome back, Los Angeles, to the LA Football Show. Final segment on radio, Trojans Talk. If you're on podcast, what's up, Trojans fans? Thanks, as always, for hanging out with us. I'm Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the madman, Jamal Madney, and plenty of Trojans football to talk about as I just wrapped up USC Media Day. Love that this team's been doing this since Lincoln Riley came in. It's 3 hours of basically 40 players and coaches, and you get to do the whole circuit interview, each group essentially for 30 minutes. So ton of fun down at the John McKay Center, the beautiful USC campus. So excited to get all into it. But Mr. Madney, what's up, brother? Excited to talk Trojans football with you here in the Southland.
Always excited to talk about the Trojans, Rye. So much to dive into. We got Pac-12 Media Day recap. We got the Trojans Media Day recap. So never a dull moment in USC land. And, we're just about a month away, Ryan, from kickoff. And hard to believe that the season is finally here, but we can't wait.
Cannot wait. Heading into the season, remember this show being brought to you by BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% bonus on your first deposit. Pick the Trojans to win the national title. Throw some money on it now. Why not? The odds are probably pretty good. Can all be done at betonline.ag. Promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. Jamal, I love that SC has been doing this. It's been so cool since Riley came to town, just last year. They decided last year was the inaugural USC Media Day. And they've taken this approach of really wanting to be at the forefront of university and media relations. And I thought they've done a phenomenal job, with their comms department, with, their coaching department, and obviously Lincoln Riley being the head of that. And so it's just so fun to be able to be, on campus and not a lot of schools do this, I don't think. And, certainly no pro teams do this. So it's pretty cool to be able to be in the facility with all these players. Wish you were there with me, but hopefully one year you will be. But it's just a ton of fun to be able to kind of get this access to this team and glad we can bring it to all the Trojans fan out there and talk about kind of what went down today.
Absolutely, Ryan. And I think that it's awesome that Lincoln is doing this and that he's really leaning into the LA media market. He's really leaning into USC's kind of true ethos of being at the intersection of sports and entertainment, and just the overall kind of brand of USC being just so media oriented. Whether you talk about the film school or the kind of the history of USC players kind of being in television, being in movies, or whether you're just kind of talking about the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism. So much of USC is about the camera, being in front of the camera and being behind the camera. And I think Lincoln has really leaned into that. And one of the things that I think really resonated for me, Ryan, not to sort of switch events on you here, but, his kind of conversation at Pac-12 Media Day of just sort of understanding the importance of USC to the sport of college football and how important they are as kind of the stabilizing force, as the true power in the West Coast. And, just him talking about that college football is better when USC is at its potential, and what that does in terms of just the dynamics of, cross-country rivalries and talent pipelines and just media exposures across the country, and really kind of being this piece, just such a unique piece of the puzzle, really the true power west of the Mississippi for the sport. And again, it just kind of, we talked about this with Chip, Ryan, of just him being so comfortable in his own skin at UCLA. Lincoln just seems so comfortable right now at USC, and he's just sort of locked in. He's talking about just building this football empire and the importance of it and the history of it. I think his vision is just so locked in with what the university wants to do in terms of the football program. And again, you just saw total alignment there. I think that was really one of the massive takeaways at Pac-12 Media Day, that both LA coaches looked the most comfortable in terms of what they were trying to do. Chip kind of in this sort of player development, leader development place that he is as an intellectual, and Riley basically in this empire building mode of, building out the USC football factory and having that historical sense of what that means for the sport. And I don't think any other coach on any other team in the conference really was as closely linked to what they wanted to do and how comfortable they felt where they were. And so really a testament to Lincoln Riley. Year 2, feels like he's been there 20 years now with some of his answers and just how comfortable he is.
I mean, it's such a great point. And, I wasn't obviously as close to, the Helton regime, or obviously before that, I know you went to school there during the Pete Carroll era. So, and it's hard to compare to Carroll just because he was Mr. Hollywood in a sense and how he ran things. But after him, I was younger in college at Long Beach State or whatever have you, but so I can only really speak on this era. But I've been so impressed with everything you just said, just kind of reiterating, so impressed of how Riley not only has kind of embraced the history of USC and the importance of not only what they mean for college football, but what they mean for the city of Los Angeles, but then also just embraced the culture of Los Angeles in 2023 and kind of like, okay, how can we make our student athletes, our players embody the university, but also embody the city of angels? And, that's why we see them always, they're at Laker games or, I'm not saying he's necessarily facilitating all of this, but it's well known that, USC players, they're at Dodger games, they're going to Laker games. They're very ingrained in the fabric of Los Angeles. And that starts up top. If coaches get blamed for anything going wrong because they're at top, they should also get credit for a lot of the good things going on. And a lot of that's culture building. And, obviously their focus is football and not being distracted outside of that. But I think it is important to kind of embrace where you do go to school, where you reside and where you represent. And just the way he talks, he's still got that great Southern drawl still. You can tell he's from Texas. He talked to all of us today and it was y'all this, y'all that, but he's also very LA cool now. Like he's got the swag that he dresses. He looks very LA, still rocks the visor, give him credit for that. But outside of that, like he's just totally embraced the city of angels. And, I think it's obviously we know what he does on the football field, but I think that's been a very big proponent of why he's had such a quick success at USC is because of what he's done even off the field and just embracing what is Los Angeles.
No, absolutely, Ryan. And, as you're talking, I think of kind of the famous shirt in terms of LA sports. And I know you've seen it and you know what I'm talking about, where Lakers is spelled out, but Lakers is spelled out with the Dodgers of LA, the KER of the Lakers, and then the SC of SC. And that, in many ways, those are kind of LA's ultimate teams. When those three teams are humming, it's just a little bit different in this city. No disrespect to any other team, but those three have sort of separated themselves historically, in terms of what they mean to the city. And I think Lincoln gets all of that and in a significant way. And now I think, transitioning into sort of on the field, there's no team that has more pressure on it than USC from a Pac-12 perspective, and certainly one of the 3 or 4 teams with the highest expectations nationally. I mean, this is a CFP or bust year. Make no mistake about it in terms of the last year of the Pac-12 with the reigning Heisman winner, the best player in college football, this litany of wide receivers, this quintet, of just, bona fide stars at the wide receiver position. You got Marshawn, Lloyd, you got Austin Jones coming back. I think you've got an offensive line that, is transitioning, but is going to find its way the way it did last year. And then obviously all the conversation around how much bigger, faster, stronger, meaner, more athletic that front seven is. And so when you put all of that together, I mean, this is make it or break it here. This is CFP or bust.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big theme today at Media Day was, the first theme, I would say there's two major themes that I noticed. The first one, which is not a surprise, it's the theme of any football team, but bigger, faster, stronger. You said it, but that was like constantly, Coach Grinch said it a lot, Coach Henson, Coach Manning, all these coaches, even the players were saying that. Like when you're evaluating your team from year over year, have we gotten bigger? Have we gotten faster? Have we gotten stronger? I think me and you can say yes to all of those, check all those boxes. But the fact that if the coaching staff can say that as well, that's going to bode better considering this was a very good team last year. Wasn't good enough, but I think that they've checked all those boxes. They can get now to that next level. And specifically on defense, and this may be a shirt we go in with on USC. We need to talk to them if they haven't already come it, but their I don't know if it's a official slogan, but every defensive coach said it. And they said, the longer it goes, the better we get. That was like their slogan of this offseason going into the season. And that's referring to all 3 losses last year came in the fourth quarter. Even not the losses, they were one of the worst fourth quarter teams in terms of defensive output in all of the Pac-12. They average, I think, giving up 10 plus points per game in the fourth quarter. And so it just wasn't good enough in the fourth quarter. So and it was kind of that mentality. And I thought this was really cool to hear is a lot of coaches, and this isn't necessarily wrong. I guess it's just how you coach it, how you teach it. But there's a mentality of like, we have to finish. We have to finish, right? Like when we don't quit until there's zeros on the clock, like we have to finish. But sometimes we need to just not stop, period. Like there should be no like, oh, we have 10 minutes left. I just got to go 10 more minutes. Oh, there's 5 minutes left. I just need to go 10 more minutes, because you're already letting down when that's your mindset is there's the end game. I just got to get to that end game. And so if you block that out completely and there is no end game, the longer it goes, the stronger we get. I think that was a really cool concept that I took of just the repetition of that, because in anything in life, not just football, if you have that end game, you're already letting up. Yeah. I think anyone does that. I know I do. I'm like, okay, if I'm running, if I'm writing, if my word limit is 1,000, once I'm at 600, I'm like, only 400 words to go, right? You start kind of like changing your mindset where if you just got to go, you're always going to be on and you're always going to be ready, and you don't have to get ready if you're going to stay ready. So I think that mentality was my biggest takeaway, and I'll toss back to you before I throw anything else out. But I just thought that defensively, and I think that's the whole team mantra, but defensively, now it's seeing how they actually put that forth on the field and produce. But I love hearing stuff like that. You know, the nerd in me, I guess, really enjoys that, because I'm like, okay, I could see how that can cater to results.
No, Ryan, I mean, it's so interesting and so well said, because you're going from an outcome-oriented mindset to a process-oriented mindset. And what he's really saying there is, don't treat the end of the game like an obligation, right? When you say, we got to get to the finish line, you're sort of treating it like an obligation. When you say the longer it goes, the stronger we get, you're in the moment, you're focused on the process, and now it's no longer an obligation. You're starting to sort of enjoy. You know, the great tennis players say, Ryan, you know, that you have to enjoy suffering, you know, to be a great tennis player in these long endurance matches. And that's, I think, the mindset that Lincoln Riley is bringing. And it's all about that. I mean, when you go back to see the losses against Utah in the regular season, blew a double-digit lead, a 2-possession lead in the second half. The second game against Utah, obviously, it kind of all fell apart there in the fourth quarter. When you look at Tulane, I mean, it all, again, blew a double-digit lead, all fell apart in the fourth quarter. Even that UCLA game, I mean, you know, gave up a ton of points, got saved by that turnover at the end, but it was slipping away in the fourth quarter. Couldn't get a stop. You know, the only moment where you actually saw them play well in the fourth quarter was that Oregon State game. I mean, everything else was, you know, you were kind of holding your breath in the fourth quarter and wanted to have enough of a cushion. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. Ryan, when I look at this team, you know, the first 6 games, it's kind of cupcake city. And so I think, you know, you really are kind of looking that first half of the season to build these habits, build a culture, build a mentality, and then have it translate into that back 6. You know, the back set when it's at Notre Dame and it's at Oregon and you got to play Washington and you got to play Utah and you got to play UCLA. I mean, I can't remember a season that USC has had where there is such a dichotomy between the first 6 and the back 6. I mean, it's kind of insane. Like they always have one or two, at least one good game in the front 6. And then, you know, there's always kind of that Cal game, or, you know, there's always kind of that Colorado game on the back end to make you feel better. But this is going to be such a steep climb. I mean, it's a step function difference. So I think Lincoln has to be thinking mindset here, because the toughest games are in the second half when presumably you are a little bit more tired. You are a little bit more banged up. So building that habit, I think, is very intentional, because he's looking at the schedule and saying, I really have to get them peaking in late October onwards. You know, I can kind of throw anything out there September and early October. They're going to be 6-0 just off of talent. But I got to build the habits. I got to build the behaviors. I got to build the discipline, the professionalism to really succeed on the back 6.
Yeah, when I played high school football, I feel like we hated this saying when we were playing, but our coach, his favorite saying was, Playing football is a lot like wrestling a gorilla. You don't stop when you're tired. You stop when the gorilla is tired. So it's kind of, like a similar mantra and maybe less cheesy in the longer we go, the stronger we get. But I just really like that. And now we'll see like how that translates. So let's see here. A couple
Ryan,
takeaways.
You were an actor and Remember the Titans in a different life. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think so. I wish I was. Back in high school, they used to call me Sunshine because I had long hair. So there it is. I didn't play quarterback, but I had the sunshine flowing locks, if you will. So I mean, a couple, talking to all these players, it's always funny. I love covering college football for, a number of reasons. There's a lot of fun things about it, but two that stood out today was, it's always fun going to a college campus because it kind of like, even though I didn't go to USC, you reminisce on being back in college. Like, I'm walking around with my backpack on and, it's summer, so there's not a lot of people there, but still it's like, oh, I feel like I'm back in school. But the other thing is, when you go up to interview these elite athletes, I mean, Calen Bullock's probably going to be a first round pick. Obviously Caleb will be, he wasn't there because he was at Pac-12 Media Day. But you go to these elite athletes and, they're just kids still. I know they're over 18, but, some of them, I mean, Calen Bullock still has braces. Dorian Singer, maybe the youngest looking kid on the team. I mean, it is shock. I was shocked with his size and stature and his dominance last year and how much we've talked, and this doesn't change that, but how much we've talked about kind of him carrying the torch and potentially being wide receiver 1 and this size and stuff, and seeing him just out of the pads. I'm like, this guy looks like he's in high school still, just such a young face, a young soul. And so it's always fun to kind of talk to these, young men and a lot of them, all of them, I'll say, just how kind of mature they are. And, I think that's a big credit to, how they were raised, but also just the university and the coaching staff of how they've kind of molded these kids. And then that's the point of college football, right? Is they're molding young men, making the better football players, but also men off the field. So, I love seeing that. Kyron Bars, I've talked about him, Jamal, a lot about. He's kind of my guy that I cannot wait to watch this season.
Yeah.
Former SoCal kid, went to school in Marietta, obviously went to Arizona for 4 years. Now he's back, but so well-spoken. Just talked about his excitement being with this group and kind of, so many new faces on that defensive side. Obviously he's one of them. But they've so quickly built that camaraderie and that brotherhood. And I think someone asked a question like, oh, is this something is it an ongoing thing? Are you going to have to like continue melding the chemistry through fall camp? And he's like, oh no, it's done. Like it's been melded. Like we are brothers. We're fully committed to each other. Like we did stuff in the off season hanging out. And, I asked him if they, took to any spots. Have you ever been to Fixin's in LA?
I
have,
Soul
Food Kitchen.
Yeah.
So you'll like this. Kyron Bars and Jamil Muhammad. That's like their favorite spot. Jamil Muhammad said he's been there 4 times this week already.
I love that. That's amazing. Jamil Muhammad is going to be my favorite player this year. It just feels that way. He's just got that. He's got the look. He's got the personality. We're sort of same, cultural background. Jamil Muhammad is going to be my guy. I'm
similar
right
name.
now, Ryan. That's my guy. So I'm really excited to see how he does.
I feel like he's kind of pseudo been your guy since he Trafford, but mine too. Yeah. Like I love him too. I feel like, we do so much and I try to like really do my research, but I didn't even realize that he played quarterback before moving over. Yeah. Like here's a guy, as I learn more about him and talk to him more, like this is a guy, Jamal, that we need to do a profile of this guy. Cause his arc of where he's been in college football in such a short time is fascinating. Being, at Vanderbilt and then, being quarterback, transferring to, where he transferred to, and then now being over at USC, being a Southern kid and really out of his comfort zone here in LA and, grasping to that soul food at Fixin's and stuff. So yeah, it's such a fascinating story, such a great young kid. But I mean, I think me and you have said this many times just because of his skill set and how he fits in this Gritch defense. Like, yeah, Mason Cobb is going to be phenomenal. Yeah, Calen Bullock is arguably the best safety in football. Yeah, Barrett Alexander is the big name guy that joins the defensive line, but Jamil Muhammad might be the linchpin and the most important player of this defense.
Ryan, I couldn't agree more because I think you got to look at the makeup of the Pac-12. And I remember we had this exact same conversation exactly this time last year, and you and I picked Corey Foreman as like the difference between USC having like a great year and just an okay year. And granted, Corey Foreman didn't come through the whole season, but he made the biggest play, the defensive play against UCLA. That's a different season for USC if they don't win that game. To me, Jamil Muhammad is the X factor. It's going to be the difference between a team that's possibly 11-1 and 12-0, or a team that's possibly 10-2 or 9-3, because of the way you look at this conference and the way it's set up. When you look at Bo Nix, when you look at Michael Penix Jr., when you look at even the next tier after that in terms of Cam Rising, Jaden DeLora, Cam Ward, on it goes. Yes, the Keon Barses of the world. Yes, the Bear Alexanders of the world are going to provide a lot of meat. They're going to, slow down the run. They're going to provide a pass rush. But these guys are so elusive. Once they make a move and get out of containment, guess what? Keon Barrs now is a non-factor. Bear Alexander is a non-factor. Now it becomes, who's the best lateral athlete that you have? And as great as Mason Cobb is, he is your traditional middle backer that is going to mitigate big plays and kind of contain them. But who's the guy that's going to actually go make the play, blow up a play, get the fumble, get the turnover, force a bad read where Calen Bullock can be a ball hawk and grab a ball out of the air? And that difference in one possession, whether you're talking about at Notre Dame, whether you're talking about at Oregon, when you're talking about at home against Washington, possibly even home against UCLA, that is going to be the difference. This season is going to come down to those 4 or 5 games and 4 or 5 plays within those 4 or 5 games. And the guy who is most capable of making disruptive things happen in those 4 or 5 plays is Jamil Muhammad. To me, Ryan, what's so fascinating here is you talk about all of the preparation. You talk about the mantra, the mentality, everything that Lincoln Riley is trying to do here over the last 8-9 months. USC's season is going to come down to 20 to 25 plays. It's going to be 4 or 5 plays in those 4 or 5 games is going to be the difference between whether this team is going to be a CFP team, whether this team is just going to be a Pac-12 title team, or whether this team is going to be below that and be a significant disappointment. How crazy is that to think about, that when you talk about all the reps and the tens and the hundreds of thousands of reps and all of the hours, this season, for as great as Caleb Williams is and as great as Lincoln Riley is coming down to 20, 25 plays.
You got to claw for that inch, every inch.
Your fingernail for that inch.
Fingernails for that inch. So, but yeah, I completely agree. And the last thing I'll say, and we'll get out of here, is what I'm most excited about this defense. And there's, after last year, anything is exciting about this defense. But even last year, a lot, I talk all the time, like, you just need 4 stops. Like, that's all you need, and this team's going to win. But the big concern all year long was, there's enough talent in the 11 starters, but the depth is not there. And we saw that as the season went on. Gentry goes down. That was a huge loss for this defense. You see other guys go down. They didn't have the depth behind. The way this defense is positioned this year, based on recruits and based on transfers and based on guys coming back that were injured last year. Romello Height got injured very early on last year after starting very strong. The depth is leaps and bounds above where it was last year. So the talent as the starters is leaps and bounds better, and the talent and the depth is leaps and bounds better. So, I mean, this is a defense that can't get any worse, but it should be substantially better just based on those 2 factors. And then if they can get it right schematically and get it right, and the longer it goes, the stronger we get in finishing games, then, I mean, this team, the sky's the limit for them. So blast at USC Media Day. It was so much fun. We got, obviously, training camp start. Oh, okay. I wanted to ask you this. And if you're on radio, you're going to have to listen to it on podcast. We're going to have to wrap up. So go to podcast to answer this question. I know we both got to go, but I just want to ask you real quick. So training camp this year for USC, they're doing it at 6 a.m., which is miserable for me. I'm not a morning person. So I'm like, I got the schedule. I'm like, you kidding me? 6 a.m. I'm curious. And maybe I'll ask Lincoln Riley one of these days we're here. When I first saw that, my thought was, and I kind of shifted a little bit. My initial thought was, all right, is this a kind of a test scenario? Because going to the Big Ten, there's gonna be a lot more early games with time zone changes and big noon kickoff. And so is this kind of a test case scenario to see that? Now, I retract a little bit, because knowing how smart Lincoln Riley is, like, he's focused on this year. They're in the Pac-12. Why do stuff this year, especially players that won't be there next year? But just your thoughts, if there's any, do you think there's any correlation at all to that, or do you just think it's, hey, let's get out of the heat and practice early?
No, Ryan, I think there's something there. I don't know if it's the Big Ten. I think it's still sort of 1 year away in that regard. But I think what it is I think it goes back to schedule. I think that he's trying to keep these guys, the players are such a function of routine. And if you start baking in 6 a.m. starts, and, that has a domino effect for the rest of the day in terms of, okay, we start at 6 a.m., and then we go ice, and then we, tape and film and stretch and, all of the different things that you have to do after the start, and you just start earlier. I think it keeps your mind fresh. I think it keeps, your focus on the task at hand, because I think the challenge is they're going to be a 20-point favorite in all first 6 games. Yeah. And it's going to be really hard for them to kind of stay focused and stay professional and have that just professional mindset and not take the foot off the gas after about week 3. Come on, we've seen it with SC, where when they know they're better, that's when, the corners start getting cut and all of those things. So I think it really has a lot to do with this schedule and making sure they stay sharp through the first half of the season and make sure that they are still as engaged. It's easy to be engaged week 1. Everyone's so excited to be playing. You're going to win by 50 and everyone's so excited. How do you stay engaged week 4 when you're 3-0 and you've outscored the 3 opponents 155-15? How do you stay motivated there? So I think this is more of a function of this season schedule than next season's conference.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So regardless, I'm not happy. I got to be out of my door at 4:30 in the morning. I got to be leaving Pasadena. So to get there, well, I guess there won't be traffic at that time. So maybe I can leave at 5:30 and get there in 30 minutes. But either way, it's excited for the season. So we got plenty of coverage, USC all season long, obviously here at the LA Football Network. Thank you all for hanging out with us. If you're on radio, thanks for sticking around for all 2 hours. If you're on podcast, Trojan fans, have a blessed weekend. And obviously we'll be back next week with plenty more Trojans talk here on the LA Football Show. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dowd. Everyone have a great weekend. Talk to y'all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.